Welcome to this video on graphing an inequality. This is Professor Capko, and I'm going to show you an easy way to graph an inequality such as the one that is shown. So the first thing we need to do when we have an inequality like this is we want to solve it, or at least not solve it, we want to put it in a format that makes it easy to graph. And we're familiar with the y equals mx plus b format. That's the slope-intercept format where, if you recall, the m is your slope and the b is the y-intercept. So we want to have this in that format. Now, we notice that this has an equal sign here and this has an inequality sign. We're going to still work with it the same way. And this is read 2y is greater than 4x plus 10. Now, had it had a line underneath here as well, it would be greater than or equal to this amount. But in this case, it just has the greater than sign. We're going to work with this and manipulate it just like a regular linear equation, in other words, an equation for a line. The only difference is because we have the inequality, we have to watch out for whether or not we divide by or multiply by a negative. If we divide by or multiply by a negative, then we have to flip this sign. But we'll get to that in a moment. First thing we want to do is get the y by itself, right? Because that's how it is over here, by itself. So we got to get rid of the 2 that's in front of the y. The relationship between the 2 and the y is multiplication. It's right next to each other, so there's an invisible multiplication sign there. So to get the 2 out of there, we do the opposite. The opposite of multiplication is division, so we divide this side by 2. Whatever we do to one side, we must do the same to the other side. And we need to do it to the entire other side, such as that. So let's go ahead and simplify this a little bit. So 2 divided by 2 is 1, so I just cross those out like that, and that leaves on this side a y. On this side, 2 goes into 4 2 times, so the x stays there with it, so we have 2x. And 2 goes into 10 5 times. So and I bring down the plus 5. So 2x plus 5. 2 divided into the 4 and into the 10. Before I put the sign here, I ask myself, did I divide by or multiply by a negative? If I had, the sign would flip. But in this case, we divided by a positive, so the sign stays the same. Now, if you notice, other than this being an equal sign, it's now in the format of the slope-intercept, the y equals mx plus b. So our slope in this case is going to be the 2, and our y-intercept is going to be the 5. I did some other videos that I showed how to graph using this format, and you may want to take a look at those at this point as well. Also, if at this point you find this helpful, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe. Those both help with getting this channel out to others that might need assistance as well. So I'm going to pull out my graph paper, and we're going to graph this inequality. I'm going to write it here on the graph paper so we can see it. Y is greater than 2x plus 5, just so I don't have to keep going back and forth. So that's what our graph paper is going to look like. So we're going to need to graph this. Of course, this is our x-axis. I'm going to back this up just a bit so we can see more of it. This horizontally is our x-axis, and vertically is our y-axis. So the first thing we look for, I always recommend starting with the y-intercept. That is the point in which it crosses the y-axis. So in this case, we're going to have a y of plus 5. So I go on the y-axis, which is here, and I go up to 5, and I put a dot there because that is the point in which it's crossing. The next thing I look at is the slope, which is the number in front of the x. In this case is a 2. That means it has a slope of positive 2. Positive 2. So that means for every time it goes 1 to the right, it goes up 2. So if I go 1 to the right and up 2, that takes me to this point from our starting spot. So if I go from here, I go 1 to the right and up 2. This is a positive slope of 2. And we expect a positive slope to go up as we're going left to right as we read. I've got a couple dots here. I really only need 2. I'm going to connect them with a line. Now, before I connect them, I have to decide, is it a solid line or a dotted line? Because there is no equal sign here, it is not going to be a solid line. It's going to be a dotted line. If there is no equal sign, it's going to be a dotted line. So I'm going to create a dotted line. In other words, just some dashes along this point, these points, and go on up and go down as well. And as you can see, it's just going to go for the whole graph, goes on forever. And I put arrows at the top and the bottom of it because we know it's going to go on forever. So we've got this line that we've created. We're not yet to the point of completing the graph yet because it's an inequality. So the inequality is going to require some shading. So we need to know which side of the line are we going to shade. I always consider this side where the x's, consider that to be the line because that's exactly what that shows us. That's the line, 2x plus 5. The y, that's the shade. So think of that as the shade. So in this case, the shade is greater than the line. Read it that way. The shade is greater than the line. So where is the shade greater than the line? Well, the y is greater than the line on this side, above it. So that's the part that's going to get shaded, up here above the line. All of it here is shaded. Nothing below the line is shaded. Because it's dotted means it's not included. So the line is actually not included because there's no equal. It's not included. We can also check. We can pick a point and check it. So we'll just choose a point and see how it works. So I'm going to choose 0, 0 because it's a simple one. I like to choose the easiest one as possible. So my x and my y is 0, 0 here at the origin. So if I plug that into our equation, and let's go back to over here, our equation is y is greater than 2x plus 5, and I'm going to check the point 0, 0. And to do that, I'm going to replace these. I'm going to pull out any of the x's and y's. I'm going to label them. I'm going to leave a box. So I rewrote the equation, and I just pulled out the x and y. I labeled them, and I wrote the rest of the equation. Now we're going to plug in our x. Remember, the x is on the left, the y is to the right. Our x is 0, so I'm going to plug a 0 in here. And our y is 0, so I'm going to plug a 0 in there. So I carry this down. I've got 0 is greater than, and then 2 times 0 is 0, plus 5. 0 plus 5 is 5. So is 0 greater than 5? No, it's not. So that is not a correct solution. And as you can see, the 0, 0 is the origin. It's here, and it's not shaded. Only the shaded parts are correct, or solutions to this inequality. And so that confirms that this is correct, and we have shaded the right side. So that's the correct way to do this. It's quick and easy, and that would be how you graph an inequality. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the comments down below. And also give us this video a thumbs up, and keep your grade alive and subscribe. Until next time, this is Professor Capko.